Warning: some contents may be disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
Hi, I'm a 24-year-old woman, and this all started about a year ago when I got a new job at a local marketing firm. My name is Hannah, and I had just graduated from college with a degree in marketing. I was excited to start my career, and I was eager to make a good impression at my new job. The firm I joined was relatively small, with about 20 employees, but it had a good reputation, and I was thrilled to be part of the team. My first few weeks were great there. I was learning a lot, and my colleagues seemed friendly and welcoming. However, things took a turn for the worse when I started getting to know one of my male co-workers, Chris. Chris was in his late 20s. He had been with the company for several years, and he was well liked by the management. At first, he seemed friendly, offering to show me the ropes and then help me get settled in. But it didn't take too long for his behavior to become inappropriate. He would make offhand comments about my appearance, touching my shoulder or back in ways that made me feel uncomfortable. At first, I tried to laugh it off or politely brushed it aside. But his comments and touches became more frequent and more invasive. One day, he cornered me in the break room and made a lewd comment about my outfit. I felt trapped and violated. I told him to stop, but he just laughed it off and told me that I was being too sensitive. After that incident, I went to HR to report him, but they just brushed it off, saying that Chris was just being friendly and that it didn't mean any harm. They just advised me to try to get along with him. When Chris realized that I had reported him, his behavior escalated from harassment to outright bullying. He would publicly criticize my work, spread rumors about me, and make my life a living hell in the office. He even started trying to mess up my projects, causing me to miss deadlines and get in trouble with the management. I felt isolated and powerless, and my colleagues seemed to avoid getting involved, and management continued to turn a blind eye. The stress really became unbearable, and I dreaded going to work every day. I started having anxiety attacks, and I couldn't sleep at night. I knew I couldn't stay in such a toxic environment, so I decided to quit. After quitting, I spent a few weeks job hunting, and I finally landed a position at a new company. It was a larger firm with a more professional atmosphere. I hoped that it would be a fresh start. My new colleagues were friendly, and the work environment was much better. And for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. But my relief was short-lived. A few weeks into my new job, I noticed a familiar face in the office. It was Chris. My heart sank. He had somehow managed to get a job at the same company, and I couldn't believe my bad luck. At first, I tried to avoid him, hoping that he would leave me alone. But Chris made it clear that he wasn't going to let that happen. He would show up at my desk, make snide remarks, and then continue his harassment. He even started following me home, showing up at my apartment building and watching me from a distance. It felt like I was living in a nightmare, and I didn't know what to do. I went to HR again, but they were hesitant to take any action. Chris had a knack for playing the victim, and he convinced them that I was the one who was the problem. I felt trapped and helpless, and I couldn't quit another job, but I also couldn't continue living in fear either. Desperate and out of options, I decided to call my father. He was a retired firefighter, a strong and protective man who has always been my rock, and I explained everything to him, and he was furious. He promised to come down and help me deal with Chris. A few days later, My dad showed up at my apartment. He took me out for dinner and then reassured me that everything would be okay. He decided to stay with me at my apartment for a few days, promising that he would help. I didn't know what my father had in store, but his mere presence was reassuring to say the least. After another terrible day at work, I drove back to my apartment with Chris following not too far behind me. I got nervous. This was usually the worst part of my day, me getting out of my car and getting cornered by him on my way inside. Sometimes I tried running in quickly. Sometimes I stayed in my car for an hour or two until he leaves. And sometimes I just have to deal with him. Taking a deep breath, I exited my car and I start walking towards my apartment as per usual. Chris immediately got out of his car and briskly walked over to me. No doubt, preparing a whirlwind of uncomfortable things to say to me. But before he could get close, the door opened and Chris stopped. When Chris saw my father, he looked nervous but tried to play it cool. My dad walked up to him and said, "We need to talk, now." I then went inside and they both stood in front of the apartment, and I could hear my dad's raised voice as he confronted Chris. "You've been harassing my daughter, and it stops now. If you ever go near her again, you'll regret it." Chris tried to deny it, but my dad wasn't having any of it. "I don't care what excuses you have. You leave her alone, or I'll make sure you face the consequences." Chris finally broke down and admitted that he was attracted to me and he wanted a relationship. My dad was livid. He screamed at Chris. "Attracted? Attraction is no excuse for harassment. You've terrorized my daughter and it ends today, young man." My dad didn't get physical, but his tone and presence were enough to make Chris realize that he couldn't continue his behavior. After the confrontation, Chris left. The next morning, I found out that Chris had quit his job. I was absolutely relieved, but I was still shaken by everything that had happened. My dad stayed with me for a few more days, making sure that I was okay and helping me regain my confidence. I haven't seen Chris since that day, and I'm finally starting to feel safe again. My new job has been supportive, and my colleagues have been understanding. I'm grateful for my dad's intervention and the strength he had showed in protecting me. Looking back, I realized how important it was to stand up for yourself and seek help when you need it. No one should have to endure harassment or bullying, and it's also crucial to have a support system in place. So, Chris, you asshole, the coworker who wouldn't leave me alone and bullied me, let's not meet again. And to everyone reading this, please be cautious and stay safe. Don't be afraid to ask for help and also take action if you find yourself in a similar situation. I have an experience that I would like to share that deeply scared me. This happened years ago when I was still a small girl, but I want to share it here in case it may help someone. My name is Amanda. I'm a 25-year-old woman now, but this story takes place when I was just 7. I remember it vividly because it was one of the most terrifying experiences that I have ever had in my life. My family and I lived in a small town in Ohio, and there wasn't much to do there. So when the circus came to town, it was a big deal. I was ecstatic. My parents, my older brother, and I spent the entire day at the circus. We watched the acrobats, animal shows, and of course, the clowns. I've always been a bit wary of clowns, but that day, I decided to push my fears aside and have fun. The circus was everything that I had imagined and more. The smell of popcorn and cotton candy filled the air in my lungs, and the sound of laughter and excitement was all around. After the main show, there was a special area set up for kids to play in. It was a colorful and lively place filled with games and small rides and entertainers. My brother was off with his friends, and my parents were nearby, chatting with other parents. So, I wandered into the kids' area, eager to explore and play. That's when I met Mr. Waffles, the clown. He was dressed in a bright patchwork costume with oversized shoes and a red nose. His face was painted with white and also with a big friendly smile. He seemed to be the main attraction in the kids' area, and the children all flocked to him. "Hey there, little miss. What's your name?" he asked me with a jolly voice. "I'm Amanda," I replied, giggling a little. Mr. Waffles had a funny way of talking that made me feel at ease. Well, Amanda, would you like to play a very special game with me?" he said, bending down to my level. "Sure," I said excitedly. Mr. Waffles explained that he wanted to play hide and seek. He would hide somewhere very hidden and that I would have to look for him. He told me to close my eyes and count to 10. Eager to play, I shut my eyes tightly and I began counting. 1, 2, 3. After reaching 10, I opened my eyes and I began my search. The other kids were still playing nearby, but I was focused on finding Mr. Waffles. I looked behind tents, under tables, and around corners, but I couldn't find him. Finally, I wandered to a more secluded area and near a door to a trailer. There he was. He was crouched behind some boxes. I exclaimed, "Found you!" Mr. Waffles seemed very happy that I found him. "Well done, Amanda. You've won a prize, but I have it inside my trailer," he said, standing up and reaching for the door handle. And just then, I heard my parents calling for me. Amanda, sweetie, it's time to go now." I turned toward their voices and then called back, "I'm over here." Mr. Waffles' face darkened and he quickly walked off without another word. I felt a strange mix of disappointment and relief, so I just ran back to my parents and we headed home because it was getting late. Later that night, I couldn't stop thinking about the circus and Mr. Waffles and all the things that we did there. I was lying in my bed, drifting off to sleep, when I heard a faint knock on my window. My heart skipped a beat and I sat up listening closely. I slowly got out of bed and I walked to the window. My room was on the ground floor. I hesitated before pulling back the curtain. And to my surprise and horror, standing in my backyard, illuminated by the moonlight, was Mr. Waffles. He was waving at me, his smile now appearing sinister and menacing. I screamed as loud as I could, backing away from the window. My parents burst into my room, and my dad holding a baseball bat and my mom looking frantic. "Amanda, what's wrong?" my mom asked, pulling me into her arms. And I explained while pointing to the window that Mr. Waffles the clown was outside. My dad went to the window and then looked out, but Mr. Waffles was no longer there. He said that he didn't see anyone, and he was trying to calm me down. But I swore that he was there. I was not the type of kid to lie or play pranks on my parents, so they ended up believing me. My parents exchanged worried glances and decided to call the police. The police arrived shortly after, and then they took my statement. They searched the backyard, and the surrounding area, but they found no sign of Mr. Waffles. They assured me and my parents that they would do everything that they could to find him. I was terrified. My parents tried to comfort me, but I couldn't shake the image of Mr. Waffles standing outside my window. I didn't sleep at all that night, and for a few weeks afterward, I couldn't sleep without checking my windows and locking them securely. As I grew up, the memory of that night stayed with me. I tried to put it behind me, but every time that I heard about a circus coming to town, I felt a shiver run down my spine. I became wary of clowns, and I avoided circuses altogether. I later learned that Mr. Waffles had never been found. The circus had left town the day after the incident, and there was no way to trace him. The police suspected that he had been following the circus from town to town, using his clown persona as a cover. My parents and the police took my fears seriously, and I am extremely grateful for that. But the experience definitely left a lasting mark on me. Mr. Waffles, the clown who followed me home, I hope I never see you again. And right now, I can confidently say that I do not like clowns anymore. For this story, let me say my name is Raul, and I'm a 17-year-old high school junior. I'm half American and half Filipino. I go to a fairly large school in Windsor, Ontario, and I'd say that I have a pretty typical high school life. I'm on the volleyball team, which has made me somewhat popular, and I am known for being a decent player. I wouldn't call myself a heartthrob or anything like that, but I guess you could say that I'm a little bit handsome. I have a tight-knit group of friends, and we've been through a lot together. My friends and I hang out almost every day after school, either practicing sports, playing video games, or just goofing around. There's James, the jokester of the group, Brandon, the quiet but smart one, Lisa, who's like a sister to me, and Lucas, who has been my best friend since elementary school. We all looked out for each other, and I've always felt safe and supported around them. Being on the volleyball team and somewhat popular, I am no stranger to getting love letters and random gifts from admirers. It's a bit flattering, and my friends often tease me about it. I usually take it in stride, and it's become a bit of a running joke among us. But one day, I got a letter that didn't feel like the usual harmless crush notes. It was left in my locker, like many others, but the contents were different. The letter was written on a piece of ornate, cream-colored paper with intricate designs around the edges. It smelled faintly of lavender, which was unusual. The letter read, "Dear Raul, I've been watching you for a while now. I know everything about you, your likes, your dislikes, your routines. You may not know me yet, but you will soon. You're special, and I have plans for the both of us. And don't worry, I'll make sure you will understand in time." I felt a chill run down my spine as I read the words. It was creepy, almost obsessive, and definitely not the usual kind of attention that I was used to. I decided to show it to my friends after school. When I showed the letter to my friends, they didn't seem as freaked out as I was. James laughed and made jokes about my secret admirer, while Brandon and Lisa exchanged amused glances. Lucas, my best friend, just smirked and said, "Well, looks like someone's really into you, man." "Yeah, but this isn't like the other letters. This one feels different. It's creepy," I insisted. "Relax, Raul. It's probably just someone messing with you. Besides, if they were really dangerous, they wouldn't be leaving love notes." Lisa said, trying to reassure me. I tried to brush it off, but the letter lingered in my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, and it made me feel uneasy. Over the next few days, I received more letters. Each one was written on the same ornate cream-colored paper with a lavender scent, and each one was progressively weirder and more aggressive in tone. One letter said, "Why are you ignoring me, Raul? You're making this harder than it needs to be. I thought you'd be more excited to know someone cares about you so deeply. Don't make me do something drastic to get your attention." Then another one said, "I saw you with Lisa today. She's not right for you. She doesn't understand you like I do. You need to stay away from her, or there will be consequences." The letters were becoming more specific, mentioning details about my daily life that only someone close to me would know. It was unsettling, and I started to feel paranoid. Who could be watching me so closely? One night, as I lay in bed, it hit me. The stalker might be someone close to me, someone who knew about my routines, my friends, and my personal life. The realization made my heart race. Could it be one of my friends? The thought was horrifying, but it made sense. I began to observe my friends more closely, looking for any signs of odd behavior. I watched how they reacted to the letters, how they interacted with me, and if they acted suspiciously. But nothing seemed out of the ordinary. A few days later, we were all in a hurry to get to practice. We were running late, and in a rush, Lucas's bag fell, scattering his things all over the floor. As we hurriedly picked everything up to help him, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Among his belongings was a stack of ornate cream-colored paper, the same kind that the stalker used for the letters. I felt a wave of shock and betrayal wash over me. Could it really be Lucas? I needed to confront him. After practice, I pulled Lucas aside. My heart was pounding and I felt sick to my stomach. "Hey, Lucas, I need to talk to you," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Sure, what's up?" he replied, looking confused. "I saw the paper in your bag, the same paper that the stalker uses for the letters. What's going on, man?" His expression changed from confusion to guilt. He looked down, avoiding my eyes. He finally said, "Raul, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for it to go this far." "What do you mean? Why did you do it?" I demanded, feeling a mix of anger and hurt. He took a deep breath and started to explain. "I've been in love with you for a long time, but I didn't know how to tell you. I thought if I got your attention through the letters, maybe you'd notice me in a different way. But it kinda got out of hand and I didn't know how to stop it." I was stunned. Lucas, my best friend, had been the one stalking me all along. I didn't know what to say. I felt the mix of emotions, betrayal, anger, and sadness. I said in a shaking voice, I can't believe you did this, Lucas. You made me feel so scared and paranoid. How could you?" "I'm sorry, Raul. I never meant to hurt you. I just didn't know how to handle my feelings," Lucas said, tears in his eyes. "I think it would be best if we don't see each other anymore. I need time to process this, and seriously, man, I can't be around you right now," I said, my voice firm. He nodded, tears streaming down his face, and said, I understand. I'm so sorry, Raul. I hope you can forgive me someday, though." After that day, I distanced myself from him. I told my other friends what had happened, and they were supportive. They couldn't believe that he had done something so extreme, but they stood by me. It took a while to feel safe again, but I eventually moved on. I focused on my sports, my studies, and spending time with my other friends. Lucas left our friend group and kept his distance, respecting my need for space. So, Lucas, my former best friend, I do hope you are doing well, but far, far away from me. This happened to me over the past year, and I still get anxious thinking about it. To give you some context, I'm a 28-year-old woman living in a small town in upstate New York. My family has always been close-knit, but we have had our share of struggles, particularly with health issues. My father passed away 5 years ago due to complications from poor health. He had diabetes and also heart problems, and his death was a wake-up call for all of us. Losing him was devastating, but it also made me reevaluate my own lifestyle. I became obsessed with working out and also eating healthy. I was determined not to fall into the same patterns that led to my father's death. Exercise became my therapy, my way of coping with stress and grief. About 2 years ago, I joined the local gym that I absolutely loved. It was a small family-owned place with a friendly atmosphere. The staff knew me by name, and the regulars were always up for a chat. I usually went to the gym at 6 a.m. right when it opened. I like working out early because it was less crowded, and it allowed me to start my day on a positive note before heading to work. The gym's location was convenient, just a 10-minute drive from my apartment, and it had all the equipment that I needed. The morning crew was small but very consistent, and we all became familiar faces to each other. One day about a year ago, a new guy started showing up at the gym around the same time as me. He introduced himself as Greg. He seemed friendly enough, and he quickly integrated himself into our little morning group. Greg was in his late 30s, always wearing a bright smile and eager to offer workout tips. At first, I really appreciated his enthusiasm. It was nice to have someone to chat with, and he seemed genuinely interested in fitness. We would occasionally work out near each other, and he would spot me when I was lifting weights. It seemed very harmless, and I enjoyed having someone around who took fitness as seriously as I did. However, things started to change after a few months. Greg began showing up more often. Almost every time that I was at the gym, he was there too. He started hovering around me, even when I was doing exercises that didn't require a spotter. He would comment on my form, suggest new routines, and ask personal questions that felt intrusive. I really tried to be polite but distant, hoping that he would just take the hint. I told myself that he was just trying to be helpful, but his constant presence was beginning to make me feel uncomfortable. I decided to change my workout schedule to see if I could avoid him in any way. I started going to the gym at different times, sometimes in the afternoon or even in the late evening. But no matter when I went, Greg would eventually show up. Each time, he acted like it was just a happy coincidence, saying things like, "Oh, great minds think alike." Or, "Looks like we're on the same schedule." It was unnerving. I couldn't understand how he was always there, but I didn't want to make a scene or accuse him of anything without solid proof. The situation escalated when I started seeing Greg outside the gym. One Saturday morning, I went to my favorite coffee shop to grab some coffee and to read for a bit. And as I settled into a corner, I heard the familiar voice. "Hey, fancy seeing you here," Greg said, taking a seat at the table next to mine. My heart sank. This was my go-to spot, a place where I felt safe and relaxed, and seeing him there felt like an invasion of my personal space. "I didn't know you came here," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Oh, I love this place. Best coffee in town, you know," he replied, flashing that unsettling bright smile. After that, I started seeing him more frequently around town, at the grocery store, the park, even at the library. Each time, he acted like it was a random encounter, but I knew deep down that it wasn't. The odds of us running into each other so often were too slim to be mere coincidence. But the final straw came when Greg appeared near my workplace. I work at a marketing firm downtown, and one afternoon I was leaving for lunch. I saw him standing across the street. He then waved and started walking toward me. "Hey, I was just in the area and I thought I'd grab some lunch. Want to join me?" he asked. Panic set in. How did he know where I worked? I hadn't mentioned my job or its location to him. "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm actually really busy today," I said, forcing a smile. "Maybe another time." Greg's expression suddenly changed though. His face twisted into a look of frustration and anger. "Why are you avoiding me?" he demanded. "I'm not avoiding you," I lied. "I just have a lot on my plate right now," I added. "You're lying. I can tell. Don't you know we belong together? Why can't you see that? Why are you avoiding me? I'm doing my best to be around you all the time and to see you all the time, but you just keep avoiding me, giving me that fake smile of yours." His words sent a chill down my spine. He had never said anything like that before, and I have never seen him like that before too. I realized then that this wasn't just a series of coincidences. Greg was stalking me, and Greg was mad crazy. "I need to go. Please leave me alone or I'll call the police on you," I said firmly. Greg's face contorted with rage, and then he yelled, "You're making a mistake! You're making a mistake! We belong together!" People on the street were starting to stare, and I pulled out my phone and dialed 911, making sure Greg could see what I was doing. "Leave now, or I will have you arrested," I said, my voice shaking. Greg hesitated, and then he turned and walked away, muttering under his breath. I watched him go, my heart pounding in my chest, and my knees were shaking. I stayed on the line with the dispatcher, explaining the situation and providing a description of Greg and the situation. A police officer came and I filed for a report. But since he didn't exactly harm me, and I could not provide concrete proof of the stalking, they couldn't do more. But I didn't see Greg after that day. He stopped coming to the gym, and I no longer ran into him around town. My friends and coworkers were also incredibly supportive, helping me feel safer during that difficult time. Despite Greg's disappearance, I really couldn't shake the fear that he had instilled in me. I was worried that he was just lurking around in the corners, watching me. I decided to find a new gym, even though I loved the one that I had been going to for years. It really broke my heart to leave that place. But I knew that this was the best thing for my safety and also for my peace of mind. I found another gym a bit further from my apartment, and the staff there were understanding when I explained my situation. It really took some time, but I eventually started to feel comfortable and safe again. I didn't have to work out while looking at my back anymore. Looking back, I realized how important it is to trust your instincts. If someone's behavior makes you uncomfortable, don't just ignore it. Don't just think that it was a mere coincidence. Speak up, take action, and then protect yourself. So, Greg, the gym buddy who took it too far, let's not meet again. Hello everyone, I'm Adam, and I'm a 25-year-old guy working at Walmart. Of course, I'm not gonna tell you which one. I have been working there for the past 3 years. It's not my dream job, but it pays the bills, and I am able to save up a bit while I figure out what I really want to do. I usually work the evening shift from 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. It's not a bad schedule, as it leaves my mornings free, and I have grown accustomed to the routine. On this particular day, I was assigned to stock shelves in the grocery section. It's a task that I have done countless of times, and I usually zone out and get into a rhythm. But that day, something, or rather, someone, broke my routine in a way that still gives me chills. It started around 5 p.m. when a woman approached me as I was stocking the cereal aisle. She was in her early 30s with shoulder-length brown hair and a friendly demeanor. She asked where she could find a specific brand of granola. I pointed her to the right shelf, and I thought nothing of it. Helping customers is part of the job, and her question seemed perfectly normal. However, as I moved to restock another section, I noticed the same woman nearby. This time, she asked me where to find almond milk. I showed her the dairy section, and again, I didn't think much of it. Maybe she was just health conscious, and she had a lot of specific questions. But as I continued with my work, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was following me. No matter which aisle I moved to, she seemed to be there with another question. She asked about gluten-free bread, organic vegetables, and even cleaning supplies. Each time I patiently answered her questions, but the unease was beginning to set in. I started to wonder if I was overthinking things. Maybe she just had a lot of questions, and it was a coincidence that she kept finding me. But by the 5th or 6th encounter, I decided to test my theory. I moved to a completely different section of the store, away from the groceries, to see if she would follow. And sure enough, she appeared, asking where to find the light bulbs. My heart rate spiked. There was no way this was just a coincidence anymore. I tried to remain calm and polite though, but I was genuinely creeped out. I decided to take my break early. I headed to the employee area, and I stayed there for a while, hoping that she would finish her shopping and then leave. After about 20 minutes, I went back to the floor, cautiously scanning the aisles. Thankfully, I didn't see her anymore, and I instantly felt relief. Maybe it was just all in my head, and that she had already left. The rest of my shift went by uneventfully. I finished stocking the shelves, helped a few more customers, and then I clocked out at 11 p.m. I was tired. I was ready to go home. I headed to my car, which was parked in our employee lot, and I began to drive home. As I was driving, I noticed a car behind me. At first, I didn't think anything of it. There was only so many routes out of the Walmart parking lot, and it's not unusual to have cars behind you for a while. But as I continued to drive, the car stayed behind me, making the same turns that I did. I started to get a little paranoid. Was I just being jumpy because of what happened earlier? I decided to test it out. I took a few random turns, driving through residential areas and side streets that I knew well, but the car followed my every move. My heart was pounding now. I couldn't see the driver clearly, but I had a sinking feeling that it was the same woman from the store. I needed to do something. I didn't want to lead her to my apartment, so I made a split-second decision to drive to the nearest police station. As I pulled into the station parking lot, the car behind me suddenly sped off, and I only caught a glimpse of the driver, but it looked like a woman, possibly the same one who had been following me around in the store. My mind was racing. What did she want from me? Why was she following me? I sat in the parking lot for a few minutes, trying to calm down. I considered going into the station to file a report, but I hesitated. I didn't have any concrete evidence, just a series of unsettling encounters and a car that followed me for a while. Would the police even take me seriously? So I just decided to go home. I was on high alert the whole time. I kept checking my rearview mirror, making sure that I wasn't being followed again. The drive was tense, and every car that appeared behind me made my heart skip a beat. Thankfully, I made it home without any further incidents. And that night, I barely slept. I kept replaying the events in my mind, wondering if I was just being paranoid or if I had genuinely been in danger. The next day, I went back to work as usual, but I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. I kept an eye out for that woman, but I didn't see her again. It's been a few weeks now and I haven't had any more creepy encounters. I still work at Walmart, and while I've had my share out of customers, nothing is as unsettling as what happened with that woman. I don't know if it was the same person following me in the car, but the coincidence is too eerie to ignore. So, to the woman who followed me around the store and then followed me home, I hope I never see you again. Hi everyone. I have been reading stories on this subreddit for a while, and I thought that I would share a story of mine. It's my first time posting on here, so please forgive me if I'm not the best storyteller. I'm 21 years old, and for this story you can call me Jake. I'm a college student pursuing a degree in computer science. I share an apartment with 3 of my best friends from high school, Mike, Tony, and Sam. We've known each other for years and have always been really close. We share everything with each other and have always been tight-knit. Our friend group also includes a few others who don't live with us but hang out with us often. One of them is Ryan. Ryan's been a part of our group for about 2 years now. He's a nice guy, friendly and outgoing, and we've always gotten along pretty well. We're a diverse group with different interests, but we've always found some common ground in our friendship. Things took an unexpected turn one night though, when we were all hanging out at our apartment. We were playing video games, and everyone was having a good time. At one point, Ryan asked if he could talk to me privately. I thought nothing of it and I agreed. We went to my room, and I could see that he was nervous. "Jake, there's something I've been wanting to tell you for a while now," he began, avoiding eye contact. "I've had feelings for you for some time now. I think I'm in love with you." I was stunned. I didn't see that coming at all. I had always seen Ryan as a good friend and nothing more. I took a deep breath, trying to process what he had just said. "Ryan, I'm flattered, but I'm not attracted to men," I said gently. "I see you as a friend, and I do hope we can keep things that way." Ryan looked heartbroken, and I felt terrible for hurting his feelings, but I wanted to be honest and clear about my own feelings. He nodded and said he understood, and then we went back to join the others. I hoped that that would be the end of it, and that things would go back to normal. Unfortunately, things didn't go back to normal. Over the next few days, Ryan's behavior became more aggressive and unsettling. He started sending me explicit messages and even tried to show me gay pornography. He was insisting that I would enjoy it if I just gave it a chance. I was uncomfortable, and I told him to stop, but he didn't listen. Ryan's actions didn't stop at just harassment. He began spreading rumors among our friends and classmates, claiming that I was secretly attracted to men but was too afraid to admit it. He made it sound like I was leading a double life, trying to hide my true self from everyone. The rumors created an awkward atmosphere, and I found myself constantly having to defend my sexuality. It was exhausting and frustrating, and it felt like my friendship with Ryan was turning into a nightmare. When I continued to reject his advances, Ryan started accusing me of being homophobic. He would publicly call me out, saying things like, "Why can't you just accept who you are, Jake? Are you that scared of being gay?" I tried to explain to him that rejecting his advances didn't make me homophobic, it just meant that I wasn't interested. But Ryan wouldn't listen. He was convinced that my refusal to be with him was rooted in prejudice, and he made it his mission to make me look bad in front of our friends. My friends could see what was happening, and they tried to intervene. Mike and Tony talked to Ryan, trying to make him understand that his behavior was toxic and unfair. But Ryan was relentless. He continued to harass me and spread lies, and it was taking a toll on my mental health. One evening, after another round of accusations and harassment from Ryan, our friend group had had enough. We sat down and had a serious conversation about what was happening. It was clear that Ryan's actions were damaging our friendship and creating a toxic environment for us. So we made the difficult decision to remove Ryan from our friend group. It wasn't easy because we had all been so close, but his behavior had crossed too many lines and we just couldn't let it continue anymore. A few days later, Ryan reached out to me one last time. He sent me a long emotional message saying that he couldn't live without me and that he would end his life if I didn't start a relationship with him. I was taken aback and I was deeply concerned for his well-being, but I knew that I couldn't give in to his demands. I replied, urging him to seek help and talk to someone about his feelings. I told him that threatening suicide was not the way to handle things and that I genuinely wanted him to be okay, but I couldn't be in a relationship with him. Ryan didn't respond to my message, and I was worried sick. I kept an eye for any news or updates about him, hoping that he was getting the help he needed. A few days later, I saw Ryan on campus. He looked tired and worn out, but he was alive, so I felt a mix of relief and sadness, knowing that he was struggling, but also that he hadn't gone through with his threat. Looking back, I realize how important it is to set boundaries and to stand up for yourself even when it's difficult. Speak up if you are being harassed or manipulated, regardless of the circumstances. So, Ryan, the friend who couldn't take no for an answer, I hope that you are well, my friend, but let's never meet again. I have been lurking here for a long time, reading everyone's stories, and I never thought that I would have one of my own to share. But after what happened to me, I think it's important to tell my story. Writing it down might help me process everything, and maybe it will also serve as a warning to others out there. To give you a bit of context, I'm a 32-year-old single mother living in a small town in Illinois. My name is Jennifer, and my son, Oliver, is 6 years old. He is the absolute center of my world. His father is not in the picture, having left us when Oliver was just a baby. And since then, it's just been the two of us, and we have built a pretty good life together. I work as a nurse, which means I have odd hours and long shifts. Balancing my work schedule while taking care of Oliver is challenging, but I try to manage. I don't have any family nearby. My parents retired to Florida, and my siblings live in different states. This means that I rely heavily on friends, neighbors, and trusted agencies for support, especially when it comes to babysitting. One evening, after a particularly long shift at work, I stopped by the grocery store to pick up a few things. I was exhausted, and all I wanted was to get home and then tuck Oliver into bed. I was unloading my groceries into the car, and I was fumbling with my keys, and I nearly dropped everything. That's when a man appeared seemingly out of nowhere. "Need a hand?" he asked, smiling warmly. I was taken aback, but I was grateful for the help. I said, "Oh, thank you. I'm just so tired today," trying to manage a smile. He helped me load the last of the groceries into my trunk and then introduced himself as Mark. He looked to be in his late 40s, with a friendly demeanor and an easy smile. He mentioned that he lived nearby and often shopped at the same store. I told him thank you, feeling genuinely grateful for what he has done, and I introduced myself too. "Oh, I'm Jennifer, by the way." "Nice to meet you, Jennifer. Happy to help," he said. I didn't think much of the encounter at first. I was just glad for the assistance on a tiring day. Over the next few weeks, I noticed Mark around town more often. I'd run into him at the grocery store, the coffee shop, and even at the park where I took Oliver to play. Each time, he would strike up a friendly conversation, offering help or just chatting about the weather. At first, it seemed like a series of happy coincidences. Mark was always polite and helpful, and I appreciated the friendly face in my otherwise busy and sometimes stressful life. But after a while, it didn't feel like a coincidence anymore. It felt weird and creepy, and I began to feel uneasy. It started when he showed up at Oliver's soccer practice. We had never discussed Oliver's activities, and I found it odd that he was there. When I asked him about it, he said he was thinking of signing his nephew up for the same league, and he wanted to check it out. My unease grew as Mark's appearances became more frequent and more targeted. It wasn't just a random encounter at the store anymore. He seemed to know my schedule and would appear at places where he knew that I would be. One Saturday morning, I decided to take Oliver to the farmer's market. It was one of our favorite weekend activities, and I hadn't mentioned it to anyone. As we were browsing the stalls, I felt a tap on my shoulder, and I turned to find Mark smiling at us. "Hey, Jennifer, fancy seeing you here," he said. I forced a smile, trying to hide my discomfort. "Oh, hi, Mark. Enjoying the market?" "Absolutely. Got some great produce here. How's Oliver doing?" he asked, bending down to greet my son. Oliver, being the friendly and trusting kid that he is, chatted with Mark for a bit. But my instincts were screaming at me that something was off. I tried to wrap up our conversation quickly, and I told Mark that we needed to get home. By now, I was convinced that Mark was following me. I decided to change my routine to see if it would make a difference. I started shopping at a different grocery store, I varied my routes to work, and I even took Oliver to a different park. For a while, it seemed to work. I didn't see Mark anymore, and I started to feel a bit more at ease. But the sense of relief was short-lived. One evening, as I was leaving work, I noticed a familiar car parked in the lot. My heart sank as I realized that it was Mark's car. He was sitting inside, and when he saw me, he then got out and walked over. "Hey Jennifer, I was just in the area and I thought that I would say hi," he said, his smile as warm as ever. I tried to hide my panic and I answered, "Oh, hi Mark, I'm actually in a rush to pick up Oliver, so I have to go." "I can give you a ride if you want," he offered. "Oh, no, that's okay. I've got it covered. I need to go," I said firmly. As I drove away, my hands were shaking. How did he know where I worked? I hadn't told him. The realization that he was likely following me was terrifying. The final straw came a few days later. I had decided to take Oliver to a nearby town just for a change of scenery, you know? We spent the afternoon exploring and having fun, just the two of us. And as we were getting ready to leave, I saw Mark walking towards us. My blood ran cold. He said, "Jennifer, what a coincidence. I didn't expect to see you here." He was acting surprised. I just couldn't take it anymore, so I demanded, "Mark, this is getting creepy. Why are you following me?" His friendly facade dropped, replaced by a look of anger. "I'm not following you, Jennifer. We're just running into each other. Why are you making a big deal out of this?" "Because it is a big deal. You've shown up at places where I never mentioned I would be. That's not normal, Mark," I said, my voice trembling. He then came very close to me and then said with a very disturbing tone, "We belong together, Jennifer. Can't you see that? I'm not following you, Jennifer. I'm just looking out for you, helping you. Why can't you appreciate that?" I was terrified, so I threatened, "Stay away from me and my son, or I will call the police on you." His face twisted in rage, but he took a step back and said, "Fine, but you'll regret this, Jennifer. I didn't do anything wrong," he said before he stormed off. I immediately went home and I called a friend to come over and stay with us. I was too scared to be alone. I also contacted the police and filed a report, and they took my statement. I haven't seen Mark since that confrontation, but one night, when I was at home watching TV, and my son Oliver was asleep in his room, I thought I heard the doorknob jiggle, so I turned the volume down and I listened intently. But then, I heard it. Footsteps. There was someone walking around the house. I didn't waste any time. I grabbed my phone and then ran upstairs into my son's room. I locked the door and then I called the police. I was whispering to the operator about my situation when I heard glass breaking. I quickly updated the operator about what was going on, and thank goodness, she informed me that the police were close. The glass breaking woke up my son, and he was scared, but I told him to be quiet, and thankfully he listened. I could hear footsteps walking around the house. Then I heard police sirens from a distance and a door shutting. The police arrived and we only exited the room once they were right by my son's door knocking and telling us that it was safe to come out. I was a mess. I was crying and I was trying to explain what happened to them. The police officers searched the house and found no one other than a broken window and shattered glass on the floor. I was so upset thinking whoever did this got away. Until we heard some shouting and a scuffle out the back part of my house. We had some trees there and a little shed where I like to keep things. One police officer went out back to check the whole area and found someone hiding by the shed, hidden by the trees. and when they brought the person out front, I saw who it was. If you were guessing that it was Mark, then you would get a 10 out of 10 for that. It was him. I told the officer that I knew who he was, and I told them the whole situation with him. Mark denied it, but the things inside his backpack didn't really help him. He had rope, tape, a knife, and some other things in there that definitely screamed that he was lying and that he was up to no good. A long story short, I pressed charges and also filed for a restraining order. I am still shaken with the whole experience, but I am trying to move on. I've learned to trust my instincts and be more cautious about the people that I interact with. I'm just glad that me and my son are safe. So everyone, please, stay safe out there. A year ago, I moved into a neighborhood with my dog, Max. It was a quaint, serene place, and after a tough breakup and leaving my old life behind, I thought that this would be a perfect fresh start. My new house was cozy, with a small garden where Max could play. I loved the quiet streets and our friendly neighbors, and there was also a sense of community that seemed to pervade every corner of my new place. The first weeks were amazing. I spent my days unpacking, decorating, and exploring the new area with Max. One afternoon, while walking Max in the park nearby, I met Lee. He was a tall, handsome man with a charming smile. Lee was half Korean and half American, and he had an easygoing demeanor that definitely put me at ease. We struck up a conversation about our shared love for dogs, and I found myself genuinely interested in him. Lee seemed perfect too. He was attentive, caring, and thoughtful. And over the next few weeks, we ran into each other more frequently, and I started to look forward to our encounters. Eventually, our casual meetings turned into planned dates, and before long, we were officially a couple. In the beginning, everything was wonderful. Lee was so attentive and affectionate. He would bring me flowers, cook me dinner, and surprise me with thoughtful gestures. We spent a lot of time together, and I enjoyed the attention and care that he showered me with. My dog Max also seemed to like him, which I took as a good sign. However, as the time passed, I began to notice a darker side to Lee. He was overly possessive and had a controlling streak that became more apparent as our relationship progressed. He would get upset if I spent time with friends without him. He would question me about my whereabouts constantly, and he grew increasingly jealous of any attention that I received from other men. His behavior started to suffocate me. I tried to talk to him about it, hoping that we could just work things out. But his attitude only got worse. He became more demanding, more paranoid, and even more intrusive. I felt like I was losing my sense of self and my independence. It was definitely choking me. So one night, after a particularly heated argument about my plans to go out with some of my girlfriends, I realized that I couldn't take it anymore. I told Lee that we needed to break up, that his behavior was unhealthy, and I couldn't continue on like this. He was devastated, but I stood my ground. I needed to get my life back and also my peace of mind. I felt like I was constantly walking on eggshells around him, making sure that I do everything according to what he wants, just so he doesn't get mad or snap at me. I thought that breaking up with him would be the end of it, but I wouldn't be here if it ended there. Lee didn't take the breakup well. In the days that followed, he bombarded me with messages and calls, begging me to take him back. I tried to be firm but also kind, explaining that my decision was final. That's when the messages and calls didn't stop. It was just too much. At first, it was every day, then a couple of texts in a day, and then some calls, and then it was just every hour, and sometimes I would wake up with multiple messages and missed calls from him. So I decided to block his number, hoping that would finally stop him. Unfortunately, blocking Lee didn't deter him. He started leaving letters in my mailbox. They were long, rambling letters pleading for another chance, apologizing for his behavior, and professing his undying love for me. At first, I read the letters, but they made me feel more uncomfortable and anxious, so I stopped reading them and I just threw them away without opening them. Then, I started seeing him around town. At first, it seemed like a coincidence, but then I would spot him at the grocery store, at a coffee shop, at a parking lot, at the park where I would walk Max. And given the things that he has been doing in the past few weeks, I threw out the idea of it being a coincidence, and I was sure that he was just displaying stalker behavior. Lee was always following me. I began to feel paranoid and trapped. He was always one step ahead from me, always watching. Things escalated further when Lee started showing up at my house. He would knock on my door at all hours of the night. He would be begging me to talk to him. The first time it happened, it was around 2 a.m. and I woke up to the sound of loud, insistent knocking. My heart raced as I crept to the door and I peered through the peephole. There he was, disheveled and desperate, pleading with me to open the door. I was terrified. I didn't want to open the door. And after what felt like an eternity, he finally left. But the visits didn't stop there. Every few nights, he would show up again knocking on my door. He was begging for a chance to explain himself. One night, the knocking turned into banging on my windows, specifically the window to my bedroom. I woke up to the sound of glass rattling and Max barking furiously. Lee was outside my window, shouting at me to let him in. My fear turned to anger, and I yelled through the window that I would call the cops if he didn't leave immediately. I didn't understand or know why I didn't do this before, but I'm so glad that I finally did it, because that worked. The banging stopped, and I hear running footsteps going away from my window. I think the threat finally seemed to get through to him, because Lee stopped showing up at my house. I hope that meant he finally realized how inappropriate and scary his behavior was toward me. But the damage was done. I really felt unsafe in my own home, and I was constantly on the edge and always looking over my shoulder. Even after Lee stopped his nightly visits, he stopped his texts, the letters, and everything, I would still see him around in the neighborhood. He avoided direct contact. He never approached me, but I could still feel his eyes on me. My friend suggested that I move, but I refused to be driven out of my own home. I loved my house. I loved my neighborhood. It was beautiful. And I didn't want to just uproot my life because of Lee's obsession. Instead, I just took measures to protect myself. I installed security cameras, I changed my locks, and I made sure to always have my phone fully charged with me. As time passed, the sightings of Lee became less frequent. He seemed to have finally backed off. But the experience left lasting scars on me. I developed a deep distrust of new people, especially men, so dating wasn't in the cards for me right now or anytime soon. I was just so scared that something like this might happen again. I shifted my focus on rebuilding my sense of security and peace. I focused on my work, spent more time with my friends. I even took up new hobbies just to keep myself busy. And Max, my best friend, was my companion, providing comfort and a sense of safety. It has been a year since I broke up with Lee, and all these things happened. And while things are better, I still deal with the aftermath of his obsession. I haven't seen him in months though, and I do hope that he's finally moved on. I also hope that Lee isn't doing the same thing to another woman out there. So, to Lee, wherever you are, let's not meet again. My girlfriend and I were thrifting at Goodwill recently, and she went to go look at some clothes in front of the mirror. I stayed by the cart probably 15 feet away, and I kept looking at clothes. I looked over at her, and I noticed a bald, pudgy guy with a son that looked to be about 5 years old behind her. He had his phone pointed towards her, and I really don't want to think that he's taking pictures of my girlfriend's ass, so I just keep watching. He acts like he is looking for toys with his son for a second, and then when she turns around again, he takes out his phone and then points it at her. I immediately get filled with so much rage and I walk over to him. I ask him if he's taking some pictures, and he says, "Yeah, of my son, isn't he cute?" And I say, "No, you're not. You're taking pictures of something else." He said he wasn't, and I said, "Show me your camera roll," and he said he didn't have to. I said that I really don't want to smash your phone and beat you in front of your child. He then started deleting the pictures while his hands were shaking, and I made him go to his recently deleted folder and permanently remove the photos, and then I called him a piece of shit and to never do that again. I really regret not whooping his ass though. I've been super angry at the thought of him doing that to other people, and I wanted to make him suffer. I work at a financial consulting firm, and my job is demanding. My days are filled with meetings, client calls, and a never-ending stream of emails. Each day feels like a marathon, and by the time that I get home, I am often too exhausted to do anything but collapse on the couch. Despite the stress and long hours, I actually love what I do. There's something deeply satisfying about helping clients make smart financial decisions. I thrive on the challenge and the rush of solving complex problems. My team is also great. The teamwork that we share makes the work environment bearable even on the toughest days. That sense of accomplishment, coupled with the hope that I'm making a difference in someone else's financial future, really keeps me going. One evening, I came home late from work again. I was completely worn out and ravenous. Cooking was out of the question, and I didn't have the energy to even think about what ingredients I had at home, let alone prepare a meal for me. So, I decided to order food from a Chinese restaurant that I like. It wasn't the healthiest option, I know, but I needed something comforting and easy. So I pulled up Uber Eats, and then placed my order, and I settled onto the couch to wait. The anticipation of a hot, delicious meal was the only thing that was keeping me awake. And after about 30 minutes, I received a notification that the driver had arrived. The knock on my door came shortly after, and I dragged myself to answer it. I opened the door, and I was greeted by the delivery driver. He stared at me in a way that made me uncomfortable. His gaze was a little too long and felt a bit invasive. As he handed me the food, he made a weird comment about my looks. I'm not the type to take any bullshit from people, so I called him out on it. He got visibly upset and then stormed off. I watched him leave, feeling a mixture of anger and unease. I just shook my head and I went back inside and sat down to eat. As I was eating, my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from the delivery driver. He told me that I wasn't too pretty and that I should be thankful that he even gave me attention. My stomach churned and I felt a wave of anger wash over me. And then he said that I was just playing hard to get. I was stunned and I was disgusted with this guy. More messages followed, each one more disturbing than the last. He called me names and made threats, but the most chilling message simply said, "I'll see you later." I was furious and I immediately reported the incident to Uber Eats. I hoped that that would be the end of it. I couldn't finish my dinner. The messages had left me on edge and my appetite was gone. I felt a knot of anxiety forming in my stomach. I went to bed, but I couldn't fall asleep right away. My mind was racing and I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. So I started playing with my phone and also watching some videos to distract myself. The glow of the screen was my only comfort in the darkness. But then, I heard a noise outside my place. It sounded like someone was jiggling the doorknob. My heart raced as I got up and I quietly walked to the door to check the peephole. And to my horror, I saw the delivery driver from earlier. He was fiddling with my door trying to get in. Fear paralyzed me for a moment, but I decided to go back to my room. I walked quietly again, but my shirt accidentally hit my remote on the table and it fell and made a thud. It probably made him realize that I was there, so he started banging on the door and screaming at me. I panicked. I grabbed my phone and I ran back to my room and I locked the door to call the police. My hands were shaking as I explained the situation to them, and they assured me that help was on the way. The minutes felt like hours as I waited there, my heart pounding in my chest. I could still hear him outside, banging on the door and shouting. I backed away from the door, trying to find a safe spot in my bedroom. And finally, I heard the sounds of sirens in the distance. Relief washed over me as the police arrived, and funny enough, the guy was actually still there. I really thought that he would leave at the sound of the police sirens. They quickly apprehended the delivery driver, and I watched through the peephole as they handcuffed him and then led him away. A police officer then came to me and interviewed me about what happened. What happened really shook me. I was paranoid for a while, so I decided to install a camera at my front door. And you know what? I probably won't be ordering in anytime soon. Hi everyone, my name is Richard, and this all happened when I went to the mall to buy a wedding anniversary present for my parents. They were celebrating their 30th anniversary, and I wanted to get them something special. I figured that the mall would have a variety of options, so I took a Saturday afternoon to go shopping. As I entered the mall, I was preoccupied with ideas for the perfect gift. I wasn't paying much attention to where I was walking, and I accidentally bumped into a woman. She looked to be in her 20s, and I immediately apologized. She didn't seem upset, and we both went our way. I didn't think much of it at that time. I just wanted to find a gift and be done with it. I started off by checking out some jewelry stores, thinking a nice couple necklace or bracelet might be a good idea. As I moved from store to store, I kept seeing the same woman that I had bumped into earlier. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence. The mall isn't that big, so it's not unusual to run into the same people more than once. But it just kept happening. Every store that I went to, she was there, seemingly browsing, but always keeping an eye on me. I started to feel uneasy. It seemed like everywhere that I turned, she was there, but getting closer each time. She was always in my periphery, just close enough for me to notice, but not enough to make a scene. After about 2 hours of wandering around the mall and feeling increasingly paranoid, I finally found the perfect gift. A beautiful photo frame with intricate designs on it. My parents love displaying family photos, and I thought that it would be a thoughtful addition to their collection. I bought the frame, and I felt a sense of relief, thinking that I could finally leave and put this weird experience behind me. As I was heading towards the exit, I heard someone call out to me. I turned around, and it was the woman from earlier. She asked if I wanted to grab a coffee with her. I was taken aback. I felt a chill run down my spine. I had been feeling uneasy about her presence all afternoon, and now she was directly approaching me. I declined, trying to be as polite as possible, but she didn't take it well. And it shocked me because her reaction was immediate and intense. She started yelling, attracting the attention of everyone around us. She screamed that she loved me, and that bump earlier was a sign that we were meant to be together. She insisted that the way I looked at her while apologizing was a clear proof that I liked her too. I was stunned. I didn't know how to react, but I just knew that this woman was crazy. She needed help, and I needed to be away from her. People were starting to gather, and I felt trapped and embarrassed. So I did the only thing that I could think of. I ran. I turned around, and I bolted towards the exit, clutching the gift that I had bought. I could hear her screaming behind me, but I didn't look back. I just wanted to get out of there as quickly as possible. I reached my car, I got in, and I drove off, and my heart was pounding in my chest. I kept checking the rear view mirror, half expecting to see her following me. But she didn't. I got home and I decided not to tell my family because I didn't want to ruin the mood in the celebration. I know my parents could tell that I was a bit shaken, but I told them that it was nothing and they didn't press for it. It's safe to say that I haven't been back to that mall in 10 months since the incident. Hi everyone, I'm a 27-year-old female. I've always been an avid hiker. There's something about being out in the wilderness that clears my mind and makes me feel alive, you know? I often hike alone because it gives me a sense of peace and solitude. I know the risk, like getting lost, encountering wild animals, but I always felt prepared. I had my maps, my gear, and my well-worn hiking boots. Last fall, the foliage was exceptionally beautiful. The leaves had turned brilliant shades of red, orange, and yellow, and I didn't want to miss a single moment. I decided to tackle a new trail that I had heard about. It was a bit more remote than my usual spots, but that added to the allure. I was excited for the challenge and the chance to explore a new area. But of course, I also had to do my research about the area in case something happens. One Saturday morning, I set out early. The drive to the trailhead took about an hour, and I enjoyed the scenic route through winding country roads. I arrived at a small gravel parking lot, and I noticed only a few other cars. Perfect. I like the idea of having the trail mostly to myself. I double-checked my gear, locked my car, and I started down the path. The air was crisp, and the forest was alive with the sounds of rustling leaves and also chirping birds. I felt a rush of excitement and anticipation. The trail was well marked, and I settled into a steady pace, taking in the beauty around me. About an hour into my hike, I noticed someone else on the trail ahead of me. It was a man, dressed in dark clothing, moving at a leisurely pace. I didn't think much of it at first. It wasn't uncommon to come across other hikers, even on more remote trails, you know? I kept my distance, not wanting to intrude on his solitude or have mine interrupted. But as I got closer, something about the man's demeanor struck me as odd. He seemed to be deliberately slowing down, almost as if he was waiting for me to catch up to him. I felt a twinge of unease, but I just brushed it off. Maybe he was just taking in the scenery or adjusting his gear. When I finally did pass him, I offered a polite nod and continued on my way. He didn't respond. He just stared at me with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. So I quickened my pace, wanting to put some distance between us. I told myself that I was just being paranoid. After all, I was out in the middle of the forest, and most people who hike are also friendly and harmless. As I continued along the trail, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every so often, I would glance back, half expecting to see the man behind me. But he wasn't there, and I couldn't see anything. The trail twisted and turned through dense woods, and I couldn't see far in any direction. My unease started to grow, and I found myself listening intently for any sounds of footsteps or movement. I didn't understand why. I've been on hikes so many times before, and this is the first time that I've ever felt this way. About 3 hours into the hike, I stopped for a break. I found a large rock to sit on, and then I pulled out my water bottle and a snack. The forest was quiet, and the only sounds were the occasional rustle of leaves and the distant call of a bird. I haven't seen any other hiker in a while. I just tried to relax, but I just couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. As I finished my break and I got ready to continue, I heard a faint rustling behind me. I turned around, expecting to see nothing as I have earlier. But that's when I saw the man again, standing a short distance away. My heart skipped a beat. Why was he still here? Had he been following me this whole time? I quickly packed up my things and I started walking again, faster this time. I could hear my own breath and the pounding of my heart in my ears. The trail ahead seemed to stretch endlessly, and I couldn't see another soul in sight. After another hour of hiking, I reached a small clearing. I stopped to catch my breath and scan the area. And that's when I saw him again, standing at the edge of the clearing just watching me. Panic surged through me. This was no coincidence. He was definitely following me. If by now you're thinking that I should have called for help, I just want to let you know that during hikes I don't usually bring my phone, which was a massive mistake on my part. I decided to take a detour off the main trail. I thought that if I could lose him in the dense woods, I could make my way back to the trailhead using my map and compass. I veered off the path and I started weaving through the trees, hoping to confuse him and throw him off my trail. For a while, it seemed to work. I didn't see or hear him, and I started to feel a glimmer of hope. Maybe I had lost him. But then, I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps behind me. My heart raced, and I broke into a run. The underbrush clawed at my legs and the low-hanging branches scratched my face, but I didn't care. I just needed to get away from this guy. The forest was a maze of trees and bushes, and I struggled to keep my bearings. I stumbled over roots and rocks, barely keeping myself upright. The footsteps behind me grew louder, and I could hear him crashing through the underbrush getting closer. And just when I thought that I couldn't run any longer, I spotted a small stream up ahead. I remembered while I was studying the area that this stream led to a service road usually used here. I pushed forward, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The stream twisted and turned and I struggled. I could still hear him behind me, but the sound seemed to be getting fainter. I didn't want to look back though and slow myself down. And after what felt like an eternity, the stream led me to a wider path. I recognized it as the service road used by park rangers. Relief washed over me, and I knew that this road would eventually lead back to the main trail and the parking lot. I kept moving, my legs heavy with exhaustion, but I was driven by the need to get to safety. As I walked, I kept looking over my shoulder, half expecting to see him emerge from the trees. And finally, the parking lot came into view. I could see a few cars, including my own, and I felt a surge of relief. I practically ran to my car, fumbling with my keys as I unlocked the door. I jumped in, locked the doors, and I took a moment to catch my breath. I was safe. For now. I took a few deep breaths and I started my car. The drive back to the town was a blur. My mind raced with thoughts of what had just happened. Who was that man? Why was he following me? I felt a wave of nausea and I had to pull over to the side of the road to collect myself. When I got home, I called the park rangers and I reported the incident. They took my statement and assured me that they would investigate, but no one called me back to give me an update. What happened really messed me up, and I decided to put my love for hiking on hold. Instead, I just took walks around my neighborhood, always in the daylight, and always with my phone in hand. I know one day I will get over this and go hiking again. But next time, maybe I'll bring a friend or a family member with me. I traveled to Seoul for a week by myself back in 2018 because I was still studying and Seoul is expensive. At that time, I was doing a semester abroad in Kyoto. I decided to book a room in a hostel, and it was supposed to be a mixed dorm for 6 people. Upon arrival, I found out that I was actually going to be sharing a room with 5 other men who were already staying at the hostel. At that point, I was still quite naive and I didn't think much of it. Besides, the hostel was already fully booked. There was one guy from Japan, one Korean, 2 Chinese, and a German in my room. The German guy gave me weird vibes from the beginning, especially by the way that he would just stare at me. But I just brushed it off because I would be out and about all day anyway. Every single day, he would ask if I wanted to hang out and go see the sights together, which I really like to do on my own, so I would always come up with an excuse. One time, I accepted his invitation to explore Gangnam, and it was just awkward. We had very little to speak about besides small talk. When I would get ready in the morning, as in apply my makeup and do my hair, he would just stand there and watch and say nothing. I got annoyed and I asked him if he didn't have to be somewhere else several times, and he would just shrug. Anyway, for the entire week, I was weirded out, but I did my best to avoid him. One time, we ran into each other at a cafe in the city center where I found it strange because what are the odds, you know? The other guys in my dorm room were actually super nice, and we even all went out for dinner one night. Then, on my very last day, I woke up too early and drifted back to sleep. The next time that I woke up, it was to him sitting by my bedside and then caressing my arm and shoulder. I immediately sat straight and I asked what he was doing. Even though it was only my arm he was touching, I felt so disgusted. I always thought of myself as someone who would scream and curse at someone in a situation like this, but I was simply dazed and shocked. He then went on to confess his love for me, how he wanted to meet up when we were back home, and how I was just so special. And note, I'm from Germany too. When I pointed out that he couldn't possibly be in love with me because it had only been a week, he insisted that he just knew and that he wanted to show me his affection. At that point, I was just so nauseous. Of course, he was leaving that morning too and offered to go to the airport together. I insisted to take a later bus, and he thankfully left it at that. I just couldn't wait for him to just go and leave me alone. I am so glad that I didn't run into him at the airport, but at some point, I did just burst into tears because it had been so exhausting to ward off his advances all week and then gently telling him that I wasn't interested in him after he'd fucking touched me while I was sleeping. I don't know how I managed to remain so calm and polite to him, but who knows how he would have acted if I had been aggressive. With hindsight, I think I should have insisted to switch rooms, but up until the very last morning, nothing had actually happened, and I would tell myself that maybe that poor guy was just awkward but didn't mean it. After that, I never doubted my instincts again. Hey Reddit, something happened to me last summer that I need to get off my chest. My name is Sarah, and I'm from Pennsylvania. Last summer, I landed a job as a lifeguard at our local community pool. It was my first real job, and I was excited for it. The pool was a popular spot in our small town, and I knew it would be a busy summer. The job was perfect for me. I got to spend my days outside, and I had a good tan by the end of June. Also, I love swimming. Plus, the pay was decent, and I could save up a bit of money before entering college. Every day, I would put on my red swimsuit, grab my whistle, and then head to the pool. The first few weeks were uneventful. I got along with my fellow lifeguards, and the job was pretty easy. We would watch over the swimmers, make sure everyone was safe, and occasionally jump in to help a kid who had gotten in over their head. I felt a sense of responsibility and pride in what I was doing. About a month into the job, I noticed a teen who started coming to the pool every day. He looked around my age, maybe a bit younger. He was tall, lanky, and always seemed to be alone. At first, I didn't think much of it. We had a lot of regulars, and it wasn't unusual for someone to spend their entire summer at the pool. But this guy was different. He never swam. He would just sit on the edge of the pool or in one of the lounge chairs, always watching. I started to feel his eyes on me even when I wasn't looking in his direction. It was unsettling to say the least, but I tried to brush it off. I told myself that he was just a shy guy and maybe had a crush on me. As the days went by, his presence became more and more noticeable. He would always find a spot where he had a clear view of my lifeguard chair. When I walked around the pool, I could feel his gaze following me. It really made me uncomfortable, but I didn't want to make a big deal out of it, especially if maybe I was wrong. I was there to do a job, and I didn't want to cause any unnecessary drama. One afternoon while I was on break, I saw him walking towards the snack bar, and I decided to walk the opposite way to avoid any interaction. As I passed by a group of kids playing in the shallow end, I glanced back and saw him standing still, just watching me. And my heart raced, and I hurried back to the lifeguard station. A few days later, I found a note in my locker. It was a simple handwritten note that said, "You look beautiful today." There was no name on it, but I had a sinking feeling I knew who it was from. I should have reported it, but I didn't want to overreact. Maybe it was just a harmless crush, as I thought. He would get bored, and then he would just move on. But the notes kept coming. One every few days, always complimentary, but always in that same handwriting. It was clear that whoever was leaving the notes knew my schedule and also had access to the staff area. My discomfort grew, but I still didn't say anything. I didn't want to be the paranoid girl who made a fuss over nothing. One evening after my shift ended, I decided to walk home. It was only a few blocks away and the weather was nice. As I left the pool and I started down the street, I had that eerie feeling of being watched. I glanced over my shoulder and I saw him a few paces behind me. My heart skipped a beat and I quickened my pace. He matched my speed, staying just a few steps behind me. I felt a wave of panic rise in my chest. I reached for my front door, fumbled with my keys, and then rushed inside. I slammed the door shut and I locked it, my hands trembling. I peeked through the window and saw him standing on the sidewalk, staring at my house. And after what felt like an eternity, he then turned and then walked away. The next day at work, I was on edge. I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting him to lurk around every corner. And when he finally showed up, I felt a knot of dread in my stomach. His behavior had crossed the line, and I knew that I couldn't ignore it any longer. I decided to confront him if he got any closer. As my shift ended, I saw him walking towards me. I gathered my courage and I walked up to him too. I told him that he needed to stop following me and then to leave me alone. His face twisted into an expression of hurt and anger. He stammered something about how he thought that I liked him too. I was firm and I told him no, and that he was making me uncomfortable and that he needed to leave me alone. He then walked off, muttering under his breath. I hoped that that would be the end of it, but I couldn't shake the feeling that things were far from over. And unfortunately, I was right. For a few days, he didn't show up at the pool. I started to relax, thinking maybe he had finally gotten the message. But then the phone call started. My phone would ring late at night, and when I answered, there would be a silence on the end. Sometimes I heard breathing, other times nothing at all. I blocked the number, but the new ones kept coming, and I just couldn't figure out how he had gotten my number. One night, I heard a noise outside my window. Fortunately, I was still awake at that time, so I peeked through the curtains, and I saw him standing in my yard, looking up at my window. My blood ran cold, and I called my parents who were out for the evening, and they rushed back home. And by the time that they arrived, he was gone. That was the breaking point. My parents called the police and I filed a report. The officers took my statement and they said that they would keep an eye out for him. I had hoped that the police involvement would scare him off, but I just couldn't shake the fear that gripped me whenever I thought about him. The next day, the lifeguard manager called a meeting and I explained what had been happening, and they took it seriously. They increased security around the pool and the staff was instructed to keep a lookout for him. I felt a bit safer knowing that I had people watching my back. A week went by without any sightings or incidents, and I started to feel better. But then one evening as I was leaving the pool, I saw him standing at the end of the street just staring at me. My heart pounded in my chest, and rather than confronting him, I decided to hurry back inside. I then called the police and they arrived quickly. They found him lurking nearby and then arrested him for trespassing. He was given a warning to stay away from me. The rest of the summer passed without any further incidents. I had finished my job at the pool and prepared to head off to college. The experience had left a mark on me and I just couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, even when I knew that I was safe. Looking back, I realized how important it is to trust your instincts and to take action when something feels off. I never imagined that a simple summer job could turn into such a terrifying ordeal, but it did. I hope my story serves as a reminder to always be vigilant and to take threats seriously. Sometimes, the most innocent seeming situations can turn into something much more dangerous. I have also learned my lesson about worrying, about making a scene or causing problems. And next time that I feel unsafe or uncomfortable, I will speak and I will call them out. So, to the guy from the pool, wherever you are, let's not meet again, ever. Hi, I've been listening to a lot of your stories, and I never thought that I would have one of my own to share. But something happened to me that I need to get off my chest. Maybe it will serve as a warning for others. This happened to me a couple of years ago. My name is Sadie, and this is my story. Ever since I was young, I have been passionate about mental health. I saw how mental illness affected people close to me, and I knew that I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to help people to understand them and to be a source of support in their darkest times. That's why I decided to become a psychiatrist. It wasn't just a career choice for me, it was a calling. Moving away from my hometown to attend university was a big step towards achieving that dream. I was excited and I was nervous too, but mostly I was determined. My dorm room became my new home, and I quickly adapted to my new surroundings. I was ready to start this new chapter of my life and work towards my passion. The first few weeks of school was everything that I would hope it would be. I settled into my classes, made new friends, and I began to immerse myself in my studies. It felt like everything was falling into place. Then, I noticed an awkward guy in one of my classes. His name was Edward. He was quiet, he kept to himself, and always seemed a bit out of place. I didn't pay much attention to him until we were put together for a group project. Our group consisted of Edward, another girl, let's call her Jessica, and also another guy, let's call him Eric, and then there's me. We had to meet a few times to work on our paper. During our meetings, I spoke to Edward occasionally, but it was always about the project. I was polite, but also distant. I wasn't interested in getting to know him beyond what was necessary for our work. I thought everything was going fine. He indeed was awkward, and he would stare a little too long for comfort, but he didn't do anything beyond that. One day, a friend of mine asked me in the hallway if I was dating Edward. I was shocked, and I immediately denied it. I asked why she would ever think that. And she told me that Edward had been spreading rumors about us dating. I was stunned. I felt a mix of anger and confusion. I explained to my friend that that wasn't true and that I had no idea why Edward would say such a thing. Other people overheard our conversation, and soon the truth was out. When Edward heard about this, he confronted me, asking why I would deny our quote-unquote relationship. I was furious, like the audacity of this man to get mad at me. So I confronted him right back, asking why he would spread lies about us. He insisted that he wasn't lying and claimed that he was in love with me, saying that I obviously felt the same way. I lost my temper. I yelled at him, telling him that there was nothing between us and that I have never been interested in him. After that confrontation, Edward's behavior changed. His face had turned dark when I rejected him. I had hoped that that would be the end of it, but it really wasn't. Our group project was done at that time, so I thought things would go back to normal and I can just avoid him as much as I want to. Instead, Edward started sitting closer to me in class, always trying to be near me. I noticed him everywhere too, at the cafeteria, the library, even outside of my dorm. One day, I saw him following me to my dorm. I was scared, but I just tried to brush it off as a coincidence. But then, one night after a late class, I was walking back to my dorm with a friend when she tugged my arm and whispered that Edward was following us. We panicked. We ran to the main entrance of the building. Then we slammed the door shut behind us. Edward then banged on the door, and my heart raced with fear. I just couldn't take it anymore. I reported Edward to the school authorities, but he denied everything. I felt helpless and afraid at that time, but fortunately, multiple people stepped up to be witnesses, and the school finally took action. They suspended him, but that didn't give me the sense of security that I needed, knowing that he was still out there, potentially waiting for his chance. And that made it impossible for me to feel safe. I was upset that the school only suspended him. It felt like a slap on the wrist for all the fear and anxiety that he had caused me. I couldn't focus on my studies. I was constantly looking over my shoulder wondering if he was there. I just wanted to feel safe again. So, I made the difficult decision to finish the current semester and then transfer to another school. I would be leaving behind my friends and everything that I had worked hard for, but I knew that it was the right choice for my mental health and my well-being. Moving to another school was like hitting the reset button. I felt a sense of relief in me. I found solace in my studies, and I dedicated myself to becoming the best psychiatrist that I could be. I wanted to help people like Edward, to understand them and prevent them from causing harm to others, just like what happened to me. My experience made me more determined than ever to pursue my career and make a difference. I'm not that close to finishing my studies, but I'm getting there. So please, wish me luck. So, to Edward, wherever you are, let's not meet again. Last month, I had a pretty normal routine. I worked at a local cafe not too far from my apartment. The job wasn't glamorous at all, but it paid the bills and I enjoyed the interactions with customers. Most days, I worked the evening shift, which meant that I got off work around 10 p.m. The walk home usually took me about 15 minutes, and though it was late, I always felt safe in my neighborhood. There was a shortcut that I often took to shave off a few minutes. It was a narrow alleyway between two old buildings. Despite the flickering streetlight and the occasional stray cat, it was a well-trodden path used by locals. I had never had any issues taking this route. Well, until that one night. That night started like any other. I finished my shift, said goodbye to my coworkers, and then locked up the cafe. I was so tired, and I was looking forward to getting home and relaxing. As I stepped outside, I felt the cool night air and zipped up my jacket. I plugged in my earphones, and I started my usual walk home, choosing to take the shortcut through the alley. The alley was dimly lit as usual, and the streetlight at the entrance flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. I adjusted my backpack and I kept walking, my thoughts drifting to the TV show that I planned to binge watch when I got home. About halfway through the alley, I noticed the man standing at the entrance. He was dressed in dark clothes and seemed out of place. I couldn't see his face clearly, but I sensed that he was watching me. This made me uneasy, but I just brushed it off. Maybe he was waiting for someone or just passing through, you know. I kept walking, trying to shake off the feeling of being watched. I reached the end of the alley and I turned onto the main road. The streetlights provided more comfort and I felt a bit better. I glanced back expecting to see the man gone, but he was still there, standing at the entrance of the alley, staring in my direction. My heart started to race, so I quickened my pace, telling myself that I was just overreacting. A few minutes later, I glanced back again and I saw the man was now walking in the same direction as me. He was a good distance away, but the fact that he was still behind me sent a shiver down my spine. I tried to remain calm and kept walking, my mind racing with thoughts. Was he really following me? Or was it just a coincidence? So, I decided to test my theory. I picked up my pace and I turned down a side street that I didn't usually take. When I looked back, the man had also sped up and was now closer. There was no doubt about it. He was following me. Panic began to set in and I felt my pulse quicken. I needed to lose him and get to a safe place. I turned down another street, then another, zigzagging through the neighborhood in an attempt to shake him off. Each time that I glanced back, he was there, just getting closer and closer and closer. My breathing became shallow and my legs felt that they were made of jelly. I couldn't keep this up much longer. I thought about calling for help, but my phone was buried in my backpack and I didn't want that to slow me down. I needed to focus on getting away from this guy. I spotted a convenience store up ahead, its neon sign flickering in the night. It was open 24 hours and I knew there would be people inside. I made a beeline for the store, hoping that I could lose him in the aisles. I rushed into the store, my heart pounding in my chest, and I quickly moved to the back, pretending to browse the shelves. I glanced towards the entrance and I saw him walk in. He stood near the door, scanning the store, looking for me. My heart sank. I needed to think. I needed to do something, and fast. That's when I saw that the store had a back exit. I decided to make a run for it. I waited until he was distracted, then slipped out the back door. I found myself in another alley, but this one was well lit and connected to a busier street. I started running, my mind focused solely on getting away. As I reached the main street, I dared to look back, and he was there, emerging from the store, and he had seen me. He broke into a run and I felt a surge of adrenaline. I needed to get to a safe place or call for help, anything. And that's when I spotted a taxi, parked at the curb, and I ran towards it. The driver saw the panic on my face and immediately unlocked the doors, so I jumped in and told him to drive. When he started driving, I then told him my address. As the taxi sped away, I looked back and I saw the man standing on the sidewalk watching us leave. The taxi driver asked me what happened, and I gave him a brief idea of what was going on. He felt sorry for me, and he made sure that I would get home safely. I felt a mixture of relief and fear. I was safer now, but the reality of what just happened started to sink in. I had been followed by a stranger, and I had no idea who he was or why he had targeted me. The ride home felt like an eternity. I kept looking over my shoulder, half expecting to see him following us. I know that was impossible because I was in a taxi, but that's how I felt. My mind raced with questions and fear. What would have happened if I hadn't noticed him? How long had he been watching me? I felt a wave of nausea, and I tried to push the thoughts away. When I finally got home, I locked the door and I collapsed on the couch. I was shaken. I called the police and I reported the incident. But since I wasn't able to give a description of the guy or have any inkling idea of who he was, they just took my statement and assured me that they would patrol the area. The next few days were a blur. I couldn't focus on anything. I was constantly replaying the events in my mind. I felt paranoid. I was always looking over my shoulder and jumping at every single noise. I avoided the shortcut and I took the longer way home, even if it added extra time to my walk. I informed my manager at the cafe, and they were supportive, offering to even adjust my schedule if I needed it. A week later, I was starting to feel a bit more like myself. I had taken some time off work to recover, and I was slowly getting back into my routine. One evening though, as I was leaving the cafe, I saw him again. He was standing across the street just watching me. My blood ran cold and I felt that familiar knot of fear in my stomach. I knew that I couldn't let him control my life. I needed to confront this head on. So I called the police again and I reported his location. They arrived quickly, but by the time they got there, he was gone. The officers reassured me that they were taking the situation seriously, but I felt a sense of helplessness. How could I stop someone who was constantly watching and waiting? I spent the next few days trying to figure out my next move. I couldn't keep living in fear, but I also couldn't ignore the reality of the situation. I decided to stay with a friend for a while, hoping that a change of scenery would help me feel safer. My friend was understanding and offered me a room in her apartment. The first night at my friend's place, I slept better than I had in weeks. The sense of security in the presence of someone that I trusted definitely helped ease my anxiety, but I knew that I couldn't stay with her forever. Eventually, I just decided to move to a new apartment in a different part of town. Along with that was also a change of job. It was a difficult decision, but I knew it was the right one. I found a place with better security and a shorter commute to work. The move was exhausting both physically and emotionally. I also made a conscious effort to stay vigilant and aware of my surroundings. I changed my routines and my routes, always keeping an eye out for anything suspicious. I do hope that my story serves as a reminder to always be vigilant and to take threats seriously. So, to the man from the alley, I don't know who you are, but I hope we never, ever meet again. You're sick.
Hello everyone, it's your creepy sister here. Thank you so much for watching the video. I really appreciate it. I would also like to give some extra love to my Patreon members, my channel members, and also my tippers. Thank you so much. If you would like to extend a little bit more support for the channel, don't forget to leave a like and a comment down below. If you would like to become a Patreon member, a channel member, a tipper, or even to buy merch, check out the links in the description below. Again, thank you. And I hope you stay scared, because your fear feeds me.